This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Coragen Max insecticide from FMC. Get fast, selective, extended control of grasshoppers, Bertha armyworms, diamondback moth, and cutworms in a convenient, concentrated formulation. Coragen Max insecticide works alongside beneficials for a 1-2 punch that keeps the fight going long after you've left the field.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 at Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Monday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, a big shout-out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. Whether you're in Canada, the U.S., or beyond, it is great to have you here with us on this Monday. Make sure you tell all your friends, your family, your neighbors about this show. If you're thinking about agriculture, this is a show you should be checking out and listening to on a regular basis. And we love bringing it to you. And today, I'm bringing it to you from Kansas City, Missouri. I am in Kansas City this week for the NAMA convention. This is when basically all the agencies and companies that are doing business in North America get together for a big conference here. It's usually always in Kansas City, and it is a great affair. Get to see a lot of clients, and I love coming to Kansas City because, one, the food is amazing. Love the food in Kansas City. Great place to get a steak, some barbecue. This is the city of meat, and that's what I'm number one on my diet. So I'm looking forward to the whole broadcasting all week here from Kansas City, Missouri. So looking forward to the NAMA convention. Hope you had yourself a great weekend. We got a great show for you here today. As always on Mondays, it's Agronomic Monday, so Peter P. Johnson will be here. We're going to talk about a number of different issues, kind of a really weather bouncing all over the place across different parts of North America. For example, I was in Bismarck, North Dakota on the weekend to watch my oldest son play baseball. We landed in Minot on Thursday night. It is freezing cold. It feels like it's January again. By the time we get to Sunday, it's beautiful out. You don't even need a jacket, and you're thinking this is a great spring day. So weather all over the place. And I know back home in Lethbridge, there was like 110-kilometer-hour wind over all day Sunday, which is just, even for people in Lethbridge, is something. And we've also got parts of the country that received a bunch of rain as well. So there's a lot happening weather-wise. And, of course, this is the time of the year where we're trying to get some stuff done in the field. So Mother Nature definitely imposing her will on us. Also today, we're going to hear from Brad Ewankiw of Belchim. I'm going to talk about Manipulator and, what is actually the application window of the plant growth regulator Manipulator? Because Brad's got some information for us where maybe that window is a little wider than maybe you first thought. And we'll also have some time today for the top ag news stories of the day. Now, if you have feedback, we want to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms. As well, you can call the RealAg feedback line. That number is 855-776-6147. Now, speaking of feedback, got an email here from Rob from Alberta. And he was at an event in Calgary last week. And, Lindsay, our editor, always says words matter. And this is interesting. I had never heard this phrase. Maybe call me being out of the loop. But he was at this meeting in Calgary. And Rob says, in the speech of the TELUS VP, he used the wording nature positive in his reference to environmental aspects. No specific mention of net zero or emissions or things like that. Rob continues by saying, I think the tide is turning on focus towards continuous improvements and doing something also deemed credible and plausible by everyday people versus net zero goal and language that most see as overly aspirational. Just my two cents. Hey, Rob, thanks for the email. I do appreciate it. I had never heard this phrase, nature positive, before. It's funny. As much as we spend so much time talking about, sustainability, and then we got regenerative, and now reducing emissions, and we're going to have these goals of net zero. Now we're adding a new phrase into the mix, nature positive. Definitely does have a. I understand the strategy of that because people are concerned about nature. If you were to say, "Hey, do you want the best thing for nature?" Most people are going to say yes, and adding that positive language of positive to it is that's an interesting combo. I wonder if we're going to hear more about that. It was interesting when we talked to the Grain Growers of Canada about their roadmap to 2050, and they had those 10 policy recommendations. Remember from a couple weeks ago on the show here, and they had removed net zero from their plans, right? I think one of the big frustrations that a lot of people have about some of those goals in terms of like net zero by this certain date, say 2035 or 2050, is that, as Rob says, aspirational, and says who, and what is the math behind that, and what does that math look? There's a lot of details, and people don't have a lot of time nowadays for nuance, and so maybe maybe there is a bit of a trend where we're taking it back to like, okay, is that common sense? Is that a positive thing to think, something that we should be doing? Yes. Okay, let's do it. Practice based versus outcome based. Maybe that's where the shift is. I don't know. You tell me. Give me your feedback. Haney at RealAgriculture.com, and keep those emails, texts, and everything coming because we love your feedback here on the show. Okay, let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to bring in Wheat Pete, see how he's making out over the weekend and what's on tap for him this week. We got a whole bunch of topics to discuss as well. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. It's now time for a product spotlight. We're joined by Jody Griffin, program coordinator for the Livestock Price Insurance Program. Why should producers purchase an LPI policy?
Listening to you and Ann over the last couple of weeks on those market reports, because LPI is a forward-looking, market-driven program, that type of news also set that back on the price insurance. At the beginning of March, you could buy calf coverage at $394. Well, now we're down to that $366 range. And if the message has got to be sent to say anything, it's that now is not the time to get complacent when we're in this type of environment. This tool is as important as we always say it is, but I would say it's even more important. And I just need to remind these producers that LPI is about the best defense you can have against a border closure threat. Price insurance, it's about protecting the down in the market.
Make sure everybody you go to lpi.ca to find out more.
Choose Viatude fungicide and unleash best-in-class sclerotinia protection in canola and premium protection against white mold in soybeans. Viatude contains a powerful premix of Onmira Active and prothioconazole. This unique combo delivers high-performance disease control, crop safety, mix compatibility, resistance management, and advanced mobility for excellent coverage and superior plant protection. Choose Viatude fungicide for stronger, more vigorous crops.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Monday for Agronomic Monday. Shaun Haney, your host of RealAgriculture.com. For agronomically effective dual UAN inhibition, the answer is Tri-Bune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how its two active ingredients protect UAN from 3 forms of nitrogen loss, visit kochag.ca. Well, joining me like he does every Monday, it is Peter Wheat Pete Johnson. Hey, Pete, how are you doing on this fine Monday?
I am doing awesome. The sun is shining. It was cold this morning, Shaun. We went below zero, so that's not exactly where I want to be, but warming up today nicely, couple warm days, and then going back cold again. We're still in April. We're still on the roller coaster ride from a temperature standpoint, but the sun is shining. Pete's happy.
Well, I'm in Kansas City this week, and I haven't been outside the hotel yet because I've been working all day, but it looks pretty beautiful. And here's the best part. I'm in Kansas City this week, and Pete, so are the Blue Jays. What timing on my part?
Now, I don't suppose you managed to just arrange it that way. This is all.
No, that is totally coincidence. I'm here for a big conference this week, and somebody had said to me that's going to be also at the conference, and I'm moderating a panel, Ad Farm's Farm Voice event tomorrow. And somebody had said to me, hey, you see the Blue Jays are in town? You go to the game? I'm like, what are you talking about? I hadn't even looked. So, yeah, really good coincidence.
Yeah. So now you're
Monday.
going to the game, right, Shaun?
I think I'm going to try to go tomorrow night.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah, I'm
Good.
going to try to go Tuesday. So I did bring my Blue Jays shirt. I got a Blue Jays hat. I pre-packed. I planned. It's just a case of will I be able to get over there? But I'm hoping so.
Cool. Very cool.
Okay, like you said, the roller coaster, weather all over the place. Back home in southern Alberta yesterday, I'll tell you what, Pete, the the wind blew so hard. It was if you looked into the distance, if you weren't getting sandblasted by soil moving from somewhere around 110K winds, I think they were.
Wow.
If you can believe it, my youngest son had a baseball game during all of that. So there's that. Not good for pitchers. Great day for hitters. But it almost looked like there was it was like a fog or like a haze. You know, like when you go to LA and you see the smog. That's kind of what it was like. The struggle is on some of the dryland acres and that lighter ground, which it is in that area, trying to keep that soil home. It's and in the middle. Okay, keep that soil home in those kinds of winds, plus lack of ground cover because 4 or 5 or 6 years, really, really drought conditions. That's a tough ask.
Yeah, 100%. It's a tough ask, and there's no easy solution short of maybe putting it all back in permanent pasture and not overgrazing it, because even if it was in permanent pasture, if it was overgrazed, you're still probably going to have it blow. We're seeing floods all over the place, right? A big flood in China right now took a bridge out, and you can't, when you get that much water, you just can't stop it. It's just coming, and things happen. And it's the same thing with wind. We don't think of it in the same way, but if you get 110, 120 kilometer an hour wind, you can be the best no-till farmer. And by the way, you could be an ultra early wheat seeder, because I push that all the time. You could have seeded your wheat in February in the Lethbridge area, and I don't know, it might even be emerged by now. It probably would be. The temperatures have been warm, but who cares? It's not enough. Even with the stubble there from last year, that much wind, you plant the rows crossways. I know lots of guys won't use disc drills because disc drills tend to blow out worse than hoe drills. Hoe drills give you a little bit more relief, and it helps. 120 kilometer an hour winds, man, there ain't nothing stopping that. And so it really challenges a grower. And you still have to do the best job you can, because not every wind is 120 kilometers an hour. You get the 60 kilometer, the 70 kilometer winds. Then it makes a difference.
Yep.
Whether you have stubble, whether you have, something stopping that wind or slowing it down. But man, Mother Nature, she is a tough person to work with. Yeah, exactly. When you've had 4 or 5 years of drought and things, there's just not much there to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, speaking of temperatures, we got some, you kind of alluded to it, chilly below zero temperatures in southwestern Ontario. In northern Ontario, we've got winter canola that's out in bloom and flower. And then we've also got a lot of winter wheat dealing with some of these cold temperatures too. How will both those crops be impacted?
Yeah. So Shaun, by the way, you're in Kansas City. Well, Kansas has a lot of wheat coming into head right now. And they had some very cold temperatures back, I think it was March 26th, something like that.
Yeah, I remember us talking about it.
Yep. And so that wheat is now heading out, and the frost damage on the heads is quite visible. So how impacted those crops will be is a bit of a question mark, but there's definitely been frost injury there. Then you move to Ontario, and most of the winter canola is in southern Ontario, not northern Ontario, but regardless, it's in flower or coming into flower. I think I've seen 7 or 8 pictures on Twitter now where, an individual plant. And then yesterday I got sent a picture where the whole field is just in that bud stage with the odd flower opened. It goes to -1. The flower maybe withstands that. Thursday night, they're talking about -3. that's getting pretty cold. What's really amazing about winter canola, and we saw this last year, winter canola was in full bloom, and we had a super cold night. I forget how cold it got now, but it was -5 or -6, and a whole bunch of those flowers got killed by the frost. And the silly winter canola just reflowers. And it just, like, it doesn't seem to have a big impact on the yield at all. With wheat, totally different story. And we are not cold enough in Ontario. The advanced wheat has the head above ground. We're into the jointing stage. We're at growth stage 31. The head's probably an inch above ground. But it's got to get really cold to damage that wheat. The wheat in Kansas was much more advanced when it got those cold temperatures. It was the wheat head was probably 6 inches, and the further up the stem it gets, the more it's exposed to cold and the more sensitive it is, the further advanced that plant is. But I'm not worried about the winter wheat from that perspective. But when it does get damaged, as it is in Kansas, well, those kernels, it just doesn't have kernels in the head. And with no kernels in the head, that's a big yield implication. Whereas this silly canola, man, it is one of the most resilient crops that I have seen come in a long time. Now that we have the genetics that allow us to plant it early, and it won't bolt in the fall. Until these new modern day genetics came along, winter canola was such a crapshoot here in Ontario. And I know they're growing it in Montana. I know there's been questions in Western Canada about could it work there. It has become a much different crop in the last, I don't know when Mercedes actually first came out, let's say 6 or 8 years or 5 years for sure. It's a totally different crop than what we used to deal with.
When it comes to the harshness, though, of the Western Canadian or Northern Plains winter, snow cover has to be a real big factor here to insulate that emerged canola. Otherwise, if it's exposed to some of the elements through December, January, and February, I don't give it much hope.
No, 100%. If you can't grow winter wheat, if you can't keep winter wheat to survive the winter canola will never make it because it is not as winter hardy as winter wheat. So you just kind of have to look at, if winter wheat survives, now we can look at winter canola. But if we have snow cover, then everything survives because the snow acts as the insulator. And I think that's why Montana is able to do it. There's areas in Montana where they get tons of snow, or I shouldn't say tons of snow.
Well, not this past winter.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Pretty brown.
Yeah,
Montana. You got to get to the mountains before you see any sort of snow. Yeah, this would not have been a good example of that.
No, I agree with that. But where you do get snow more consistently, man, winter canola is something that you could consider because it just does seem to be resilient if you can get it to survive the winter. If she's alive in the spring, then boy, it's a pretty tough crop.
Yeah, you think about it, and I hear a lot of farmers talking about this. Boy, I wish we had winter barley. I wish we had winter canola on the prairies. You'd see a big uptake, although, winter wheat is an option and people don't flock to that in droves. So it may be more of a romantic feeling than anything, but it does give people some other options.
Yeah, 100%. One of the beauties in your climate of a winter crop is that it uses all that early moisture because it's planted in the fall, so it's growing in the spring, and so it uses that spring moisture as opposed to losing it to evaporation. Yeah. So that is a big benefit. But in your climate, the winters in our climate always out-yield the spring cereals by at least 20%, at least. Yeah. Because of the springs get into heat. In your climate, I'm not sure that the yield difference is as big, and maybe part of that is because we need such good winter hardiness genetics that we give up a bit of yield potential to get that really good winter hardiness.
Yeah, I think the heat thing would be a factor. That's why a lot of people were jumping to seeding canolas early as they could because they were trying to miss that July heat, that intensity, that heat during flowering time. Now that also created another problem on the flea beetle end because it gave the flea beetles a bit of an advantage on that early emerged canola. So winter canola kind of covers both of those. You potentially miss the heat in July, and you potentially are out ahead of the flea beetles in the spring. That would be, I think there is some advantages there over something like the advantages of winter wheat or winter barley.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Canola typically can stand a fair bit of heat, or it can stand a fair bit of drought, but it can't stand heat and drought at the same time.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really been the kicker for you guys the last few years. You've had both heat and drought. But winter canola absolutely is going to be much earlier than the heat of July. And so that's a huge win. How many flea beetles are still chasing around when you plant that winter canola in the fall? I don't know, but at least it's warm temperatures when you plant it. And so it's going to snap out of the ground quickly and should be able to outgrow the flea beetle damage if there's flea beetles still kicking.
Well, but I'm talking about the attack in the spring.
Yeah,
you would blow through that, yeah.
Right. No, like nothing. You don't care about the spring because the plant's so big, they just can't do enough damage.
Yeah, yeah. Curious what the audience thinks about this. Would you consider planting winter canola? Do you see it as an advantage if the genetics were there to allow you to do so? Drop me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Would love your perspective on this. Hey, Pete, we got to take a break. We'll be back with more here on Agronomic Monday. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch Wheat Pete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify.
Before you get back in the field this year, spend some time with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Get all the information you need on hybrid selection, planting depth, crop inputs, and more from a wide range of industry experts. A massive library of video content is available on demand when you need it most. Spend your time outside of the field, inside the classroom, with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio for Agronomic Monday. Shaun Haney and Peter Pete Johnson of Real Agriculture here with you. Important notice for grain farmers. The Canadian Grain Commission has revoked the licenses of Ziegers Seeds, Inc., also known as Ziegers Canada. If this company owes you money for grain deliveries, write this phone number down, 1-800-853-6705. And do that immediately. Do not procrastinate on this. Phone that number immediately. That is 1-800-853-6705. This is a message from the government of Canada. Okay, as I mentioned, here with Peter Pete Johnson. Hey, Pete, a big question we're getting a lot from the audience, and I know that your phone's been blowing up. Popular question here. Do I still run with my 28% on the wheat at this point in time?
Yeah, and so a whole bunch of people like cold, right? -1 last night. Can I still put on my 28%? Am I going to get more damage? What about my herbicide, my fungicide? All of those questions coming in because of the cold night temperatures. And it's just, man, if you don't have your nitrogen on your wheat at this point in time, first off, -1 is not anything to worry about from a nitrogen standpoint for sure. The one thing you really have to remember, though, is if there's white frost on that wheat crop, do not apply 28%. Streamer nozzles, whatever, I don't care, because the frost acts like glue, and it glues the liquid nitrogen to the leaf, and liquid nitrogen glued to the leaf is called dead leaves. And so when that happens, the whole field, man, she is just brown like it's dirt brown. And we don't want to see that. But as soon as that white frost comes off, Don't worry about the low temperatures. Our wheat is advanced. In fact, I've had lots of questions as well out of New York State, out of Ohio, and their wheat crop is even further advanced. So they're at least at first node, maybe even at pushing towards second node. And they've had so much rain that they haven't been able to get any nitrogen on the wheat. Man, the work that Shane and I did, like we are in the rapid uptake phase for nitrogen in the wheat crop. It's 3 pounds of nitrogen per day uptake through this growth spurt. And the demand for nitrogen is huge. I simply don't care if I get a little leaf burn. I just don't care. The yield impact of a little leaf burn is nothing. By the way, the -1 we got isn't going to increase leaf burn to speak of. Maybe a hair in the wheel tracks, but even there, I don't think it will make a difference. So don't worry about it. Get the nitrogen on, because having nitrogen there immediately is really critical. And so the other part of that is, well, what about urea versus 28% or 32%? And my answer is go with the liquid, because the urea, the plant can't take up. So it's got to go through a biological conversion. We're back into cool temperatures. That biological conversion can take, 5 days, 7 days, 10 days. Holy snapping. If I starve that crop for another 5 days, that's not going to help yield. With the liquid, a quarter of it is already in the nitrate form, a quarter of it's in the ammonium phase. Both of those can be taken up by the plant. Nitrate is the biggest one. So 25% in the nitrate phase, the plant picks it up right away. The wheat will turn green within a day or two. With 28%, it takes maybe 10 days with urea. So get the liquid on. The people in Ohio and New York State, super wet. So can you do it by air? And if you can't do it by air, I'm sort of the opinion, if you're not going to get stuck, and I made this recommendation to several growers there, use the widest boom you can get, like 120 feet at least, and then you can use that same machine to put on your fungicide and everything else. Keep the skinny tires on. Yeah, you're going to do some damage, but as long as you're not getting stuck, I think it's worth it to go through the field and get that nitrogen on right away, because we are definitely in the critical phase. Up until growth stage 32, it's not maybe too bad on advanced wheat, but you get past that without nitrogen, and yield loss becomes pretty significant.
What is growth stage 32 in leaves?
Second node. So you can feel, you crush the stem, Shaun. If you can feel the first from the soil up, you feel that first bump, that's the first node. If the stem crushes again, the width of your fingers between that first bump, that solid bump, and the second bump, you're at second node, man. Yeah, you better have some nitrogen there.
If I was ever in charge of the world of agronomy, first thing I'm doing is creating standardized, common ways to describe where we are with the crop. Because
that's called the BBCH scale.
It already exists. Okay, yeah, sorry, I'm late to the party.
It exists. It's just it's still hard thing for growers to wrap their heads around. So in the U.S. in wheat, they use the Feek stage. Second node would be Feek 7, I believe. Yeah. Anyway, in growth stage 32, for those of us that use the Zadex or BBCH scale, which is most of the rest of the world. But anyway, second node.
Not in Western Canada.
What do they use in Western Canada, Shaun?
Yeah, I don't know. Sprayed. We're in the 4-leaf, 5-leaf. I don't know. I think it's most. We're in the flag leaf. We've headed. I don't know. It sounds less scientific, doesn't it?
So one thing about the Yen program, the Great Lakes Yen program, boy, those growers are getting pretty good. They're real managers of the wheat crop. It's fun. That is fun to watch people ramp up their management on wheat.
Hey, speaking of fertilizer, this is kind of you were mentioning this to me during the commercial break. UAN is cheaper than urea per pound of nitrogen right now, which is not a common thing that happens.
No, exactly. Really weird. And I haven't dug into why that's occurred, but some growers are telling me that they can buy 28% UAN, 32, whichever you want to call it, at at 7 cents per pound of nitrogen less than they can urea. That's about a 10% savings. So, if you're putting on 100 pounds of nitrogen, that's $7 an acre that you can save. That's a bushel of wheat, or more than a bushel of corn. And the bigger the rate, the more the savings. And you start putting that over 10,000 acres or even 1,000 acres. That those are pretty significant dollars. So then on corn, actually, liquid is the preferred form on wheat. Most of us already pre-bought our 28% for the wheat here in Ontario. That's just the way the system often works. But this now is for corn. And so growers that typically would use urea on corn because it's a cheaper nitrogen source, they're now saying, well, if UAN is cheaper, can I use it? And what about using it in a weed and feed, or using it as a surface application? What are the ramifications? Can I still mix my glyphosate with UAN in a weed and feed situation? And so the answer is, we're now spraying. We're using fine droplets. It's a herbicide application. If you go over 10 gallons per acre of 28% with glyphosate in the tank, you might as well not put glyphosate in the tank. Up until 10 gallons, it still seems to generally work. You'll get some leaf burn, but not severe. And so we still get some uptake of the glyphosate. I don't like it as well as water, but that's sort of what the science said, or the trials that we've done would say. 10 gallons, okay, glyphosate's still maybe a go. Past that, and most guys in a weed and feed want to go to 20 gallons per acre. So that's 60 units of nitrogen, which is a nice start for the corn crop. Gets it off to a good start, have some in the 2x2 band, and now I'm just side dress the rest. You go to 20 gallons, you can't put the glyphosate in the tank. And then the other question a lot of growers have is, well, what about stabilizing that 28%? Do I need to stabilize it? Because now it's on the soil surface, and on the soil surface, it's more subject to loss. And that's where you really have to start looking at what's the rest of your cropping system. So one grower, Warren Scheckenberger out of Morrisburg, Ontario, he asked me that question. He says, what's the difference between conventional till and strip till? Because he's a strip till grower. Well, in strip till, you have all that residue in between your corn rows, and that residue has the urease enzyme in there. And so volatilization losses really do ramp up, and you have to kind of say, that's not such a good thing. So remember, with liquid, only half of the nitrogen is at risk of loss from a volatilization standpoint. It's only the urea portion, 25% ammonium, 25% nitrate. They are not subject to that loss. But that urea component is, you put it on top of a lot of residue, then the risk goes up of loss. So you might want to stabilize it with a urease inhibitor. The other component of that is if you're putting it on bare dirt and that bare dirt is dry, very little risk of loss. But if it's windy and sunny and warm and humid, then again, your risk of loss goes up. So you have to look at the weather. You have to look at what your cropping system is and decide what's the risk versus what's the benefit of applying that inhibitor.
The conditions really do drive what our best strategy is. Just
100%.
And
yep,
here's
100%.
the issue: the conditions are never the same. It seems. Hey, Pete, quickly, we did have a text from Grant, who's in Red Deer, Alberta. He had questions about his application of his beef manure. What was that about?
Yeah, so that was really cool. Grant called me yesterday and just said, actually, number one, he was surprised I answered the phone on a Sunday. But hey,
well, then why was he calling?
Well, he was going to leave it in my voicemail. So to be fair to Grant, it was, but no. So he has beef pack manure, and he said it was 75% straw. And he put it out about a month ago, and his question was, do I put that on my corn crop this spring, or do I wait and put it on after the corn is harvested? And man, if you put 75% straw on that corn crop, it is going to rob nitrogen like crazy. And in Western Canada, Like here, if we put that on in the fall, we might lose some of the nitrogen. In Western Canada, you don't tend to lose it nearly as much over the winter because you don't get moisture. Why would you put it on this spring? Then this spring, you'll have to increase your nitrogen application pretty significantly to that corn crop. That's all bad. So my answer to Grant was 100%. Put it on in this fall, and that nitrogen will be available for next year's crop, whatever crop you're growing, whether it's corn or wheat, or grow something that needs nitrogen, canola, and life will be good from that perspective.
Well, Pete, we are out of time. Have yourself a great week. What do you got going on this week?
Oh, come on, Shaun. We are into the spring. So it is all about just scout, get equipment ready. There's nothing really on the agenda other than the agronomist tonight and the word on Wednesday, which are always sort of part of the process.
Do you have your planter ready?
I'm halfway there. It's cold this week, Shaun. I have this week to do it.
It got a buffer. I'm good. Yeah, exactly. Hey, Pete, thanks so much for joining us here this week. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Shaun. Have fun in Kansas City.
Absolutely. Okay, that is Peter Wheat Pete Johnson, host of Wheat Pete's Word. A new episode drops every single Wednesday where Pete answers your agronomic questions. You can get the podcast on the RealAgriculture.com website, on our YouTube channel, or as well wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 Sirius XM right after this.
Dad, we missed the window for a PGR in our cereals.
Why didn't you add it to the herbicide?
What?
With Manipulator PGR, we can apply as early as one tiller. Just add it to the herbicide, no separate pass.
Don't miss out. Manipulator PGR is proven in wheat, durum, barley, and oats to shorten plants and even out the main stem and tillers. This results in reduced lodging risk, improved harvest efficiency, and increased yield. Talk to your crop protection retailer for more info and to confirm acceptable tank mixes.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by BASF and Syngenta Canada.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for a product spotlight with Belchim. And today we're talking to Belchim's field crop product manager. It is Brad Ewankiw. Hey, Brad, how are you doing?
I'm great. Shaun, how are you?
Hey, man, I'm doing fantastic. We're getting really close to springtime here and putting some seed in the ground. So that's kind of ties to today's discussions as we progress through the growing season. We're talking about Manipulator today. What benefits can a grower expect when they apply Manipulator PGR in their cereals?
Well, with Manipulator PGR, what we see is that after application, it adjusts apical dominance. And with that, the main stem and tiller heads will be more even than without the application. This will help to increase harvest efficiency. It also, what we see is maximum yields with that due to the efficient use of nutrients. So they've done some work showing that you'll get better yields with the use of a PGR like Manipulator. And of course, the other benefit is reduced lodging risk. Just with the shorter stems and stronger stems, we see plants standing better with the application of Manipulator PGR.
Yeah, and I just mentioned cereals, Brad. Can you use Manipulator across all cereals now, or can you talk about that?
Yeah, so it's registered for use in all cereals. We do have, so we get a lot of use in spring wheat, of course, in durum wheat. We are registered in oats and barley. There are some restrictions around use with barley, especially with some of the maltsters not accepting because there are some MRLs that aren't established in certain markets around the world.
Okay, good. That's good information to know. Okay, so now when we look at the application window of Manipulator PGRs, talk about that window and the ideal time to apply the product.
So with Manipulator, we see that there's, we kind of call it a controlled release PGR. It works a little bit slower than some other PGRs, and so we're able to apply it anywhere from one tiller right up to flag leaf. We see a lot of use actually with Manipulator going down a little bit earlier than what might be seen as a standard time for a PGR. So a lot of it is actually going with the herbicide.
Okay, so and is that something new, or because that's a different window than I always understood? That's really that can provide a lot of efficiency to your operation if you're able to put it in with the herbicide.
Yeah, so when it was brought into Canada, actually, it was targeted towards that growth stage 30 to 32, so as a separate pass, and that's traditionally the stage that PGRs are put on in Europe. So when it was come over to Canada, we kind of continued with that. But in Europe, a lot of it are winter cereals, and in the spring, when they're doing the herbicide, that's when they're applying it at growth stage 30 to 32, a little bit later. In Canada, as time has gone on, we've done research and we've realized that going a little bit earlier at that one tiller stage at the earliest is still providing a lot of the same benefits, almost to the same exact level as putting it on at the growth stage 30 or 32.
Now you mentioned lodging. That's ideal conditions, right? What if the crop faces some adversity? Is there still a benefit to using Manipulator in a situation where growing conditions aren't ideal?
So interestingly, we have seen a lot of the same benefits to using a PGR. I talked about maximizing yields, increasing harvest efficiency, and evening out those main stem and tiller heads, even when conditions aren't perfect for something like lodging. So if it's a little bit drier potentially and lodging isn't as high of a risk, we're still seeing those benefits regarding those other factors, even in those types of conditions. And in fact, in 2023, when we did have a little bit of a drier conditions in most of the prairies, a lot of the growers that used it and getting feedback to us were still very happy with the results. Oh,
I like all those. There's the primary benefit, and then there's some of the side benefits. It really does open up the impact for the grower. Brad, if somebody wants more information on Manipulator, where do they go?
So I encourage people to talk to their local crop protection retailer or reach out to their local Belchim rep. You can also go to Belchim Canada, so that's BELCHIM Canada.com for more information. And I would encourage people, if you haven't tried a PGR up until this point, give it a shot. Try a demo. Contact your local retailer and say you're interested in trying a little bit to see what the effects are. With the PGRs especially, we see that to see some of the benefits around adjustment of apical dominance or increased harvest efficiency, the best is just to try it a little bit and see if you can tell the difference in your own field. So.
Love it. We talked about on-farm trials and things like that. Put in a check strip, try it out and see. Just don't compare it to past years. Put a couple replicated trials on your own farm in 2024, and that's great advice there. Hey, Brad, thanks so much for joining us. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Shaun. Take care.
Okay, again, the product is Manipulator PGR, and that website is BelchimCanada.com. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Monday. And let's get to the top ag news stories today. Cattle markets are destined to rise and fall. Make sure you're protected from unexpected price drops with livestock price insurance. price protection for calves is available now through June 13th. For more information, you can visit lpi.ca. Okay, lots happening in the news here on this Monday. Now, the government of Saskatchewan is providing $13.2 million to the Western College of Veterinary Medicine in 2024 and 25, representing a $667,000 increase over last year, adding 5 new seats for Saskatchewan students. This funding is part of the government's commitment to subsidize 25 training seats for Saskatchewan students. 5 of these seats are designated for students who are likely to work in rural or mixed animal practices in the province following graduation. This designation encourages graduates to consider agriculture-focused veterinary careers. The WCVM is located on the University of Saskatchewan campus at Saskatoon. Based on an interprovincial agreement with 3 Western provinces, WCVM annually accepts an allotted number of applicants from Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta. And of course, we do have a huge shortage of vets in agriculture. We have a lot of vets that are going into small animal vets, taking care of the dogs and the cats and things like that. But we need vets to also take care of poultry flocks and cow herds and taking care of swine barns. And big animal vets are a little bit more sparse. They're a little bit harder to find. And so we need to continue to bring those vets into the industry. So I'm curious at what the requirement is. If somebody did say take one of those 5 seats, do they have to provide a guarantee of a certain amount of years that they will say be a big animal vet in Melfort or something like that? Curious I should do some more research on that to find out. I'm sure there is some sort of a stay requirement there. CNH Industrial's shares fell by the most since November after Bank of America downgraded the farm machinery maker following an unexpected announcement that Chief Executive Officer Scott Wine will leave at the end of June. This was a bit of a surprise. CNH accepted Wine's request to leave the company to pursue other interests, according to a Sunday statement. Garrett Marks, who is CEO of CNH spinoff Iveco Group, will succeed Wine as of July 1st. The firm also postponed an investor day scheduled for May 21st. U.S. shares of the company fell as much as 9.3% in New York to $11.16 a share, the lowest intraday price since mid-November. Tractor makers have been, of course, under pressure as sliding crop prices and rising interest rates slow demand from farmers for new equipment. CNH, whose brand includes Case IH and New Holland, sits behind only market leader Deere & Company in the key North American large agricultural segment, according to Bloomberg Intelligence. And most of you that are listening to the show, you already knew that. Oil prices, a lot of talk about $100 oil. Saudi Arabia is expected to require a higher oil price this year compared to previous estimates. According to the International Monetary Fund, the IMF indicates that Saudi Arabia will need an average oil price of $96.20 per barrel to balance its budget if it maintains crude output near 9.3 million barrels per day. This figure marks a 21% increase from the IMF's previous forecast in October. And although there has been a lot of discussion about a disconnect between, remember before it was like Australia and Canada were like the petro currencies. And if oil went up, the Canadian dollar also went up, and there's been little bit more of a disassociation of that as of late. And of course, if we've been talking on this show, there is a bit of a counterbalance here that if we do see the U.S. cut rates if we do see Canada cut rates and the U.S. doesn't, that's going to potentially have some currency impacts as well. Oil around that $100, very good for things like the Alberta economy. For sure, but obviously there's going to be a lot of focus on what happens with fuel prices over the summer as well. On the protein demand side of the equation, retailer beef demand is strong. Wholesale beef prices were mixed Friday with choice down 13 cents to $295.67, while select firmed $1.56 to $290.83. Movement was strong at 126 loads and averaged 118.4 loads last week, signaling their solid underlying demand until packers can strengthen wholesale prices. However, their interest in actively bidding for cash cattle will remain limited. And, of course, we have a beef market update with Ann Wasco on Friday's show. On the pork side, cash hog index slips. The CME lean hog index is down 11 cents to 91.35 as of April 18th. May lean hog futures finished last Friday at 487.5 premium to the cash index, while June hogs were 13,475 above today's cash quote. The pork cutout value firm 13 cents to $100.09. So there's a bit of an update on the protein side of the equation. Also, I should mention CCA. I saw one of the Jen Babcock, who works with CCA, is in South Korea this week. There's a big trade mission led by Canadian Trade Minister Ng. So while the U.S. is in India, Canada currently is in South Korea. And of course, South Korea, an important growth market for Canadian beef. I didn't see the full delegate list of people that were on the trade mission, but I do see that members of CCA, the Canadian Cattle Association, are on that trip, no doubt, talking about South Korea buying more Canadian beef. Grain analyst and trader Richard Crowe on the wheat markets. Story from Pro Farmer. The wheat market rallies as the weather in Russia remains dry. The market has been anticipating a crop of 92 million tons. Production is in question without rain in the 2-week period. The world wheat numbers would need to drop over 10 million tons to support much of a wheat rally. The demand for wheat is anticipated to be flat year over year. The EU crop will be somewhat lower due to acreage. Australia planting season is fast coming up. U.S. is set to introduce stricter standards aimed at enhancing the integrity of carbon markets with the goal of ensuring that trading schemes lead to genuine reductions in emissions rather than merely serving as a form of greenwashing. Now, this is according to climate envoy John Podesta. The State Department will advocate for carbon credits to represent tangible, additional, and permanent reductions in emissions that would not have occurred otherwise. This is this sounds like a tightening of some of what the carbon market, the structure of which. So if the permanency is a much higher bar when it comes to those permanent emission reductions. Story continues. Furthermore, the U.S. will emphasize the importance of avoiding carbon leakage, where reductions in one area are offset by increased pollution elsewhere. The standards will also clarify that companies should not use carbon credits as a substitute for or delay in making investments to reduce their own emissions. Call me skeptical, but I continue to believe that we have overpromised and we will underdeliver when we talk about the secondary income source that the carbon market is going to provide farmers. I need to see tangible. And a lot of people have talking more about insets than outsets, offsets, I should say. And there is truth to the increased value of those, but I just remain very skeptical about what some of these values are going to be. And I know some of you out there disagree with that, and everybody's got an opinion. I feels like we've overpromised. We'll have to see how this all shakes out. Opinion column in Bloomberg, very harsh on USDA when it comes to, this is very much, there was also an article in the New Yorker, the New York Times, I should say, also very critical of USDA and its handling of the HPAI outbreak in dairy animals. The column in Bloomberg was written by Lisa Jarvis, and I'll read a portion of it to you here before we wrap up. The bird flu outbreak at U.S. dairy farms keeps finding alarming new ways to surprise scientists. Last week, the U.S. Department of Agriculture confirmed that H5N1 is spreading not just from birds to herds, but among cows. Meanwhile, media reports suggest an unknown number of cows are asymptomatic. Although the risk to humans is still low, it's clear that far more work needs to be done to get a handle on the reach of the virus and how it's being transmitted. That would require the USDA and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to get out of their own way. There's a palpable frustration among infectious disease experts that the agencies are being too protective of critical information and too timid in surveilling the virus. For example, so far, testing has been limited, and until yesterday, only a handful of viral sequences had been publicly shared. This is frankly infuriating, particularly coming at the heels of the COVID pandemic. Did public health agencies learn nothing from their mistakes during that searing experience? So there's multiple media out there being critical of USDA and how they're handling this. We'll be following that here as the week progresses, and definitely a Friday topic as well. Hey, thanks everybody for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. All the best to you. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this RealAg Radio podcast brought to you by Coragen Max Insecticide from FMC. When you need to protect your crops from damaging insects, Coragen Max Insecticide delivers fast, selective, extended control of grasshoppers, Bertha armyworms, diamondback moth, cutworms, and more. Ask your retailer today.